Hi, my name is Paul Sargent. Welcome once again to AP Euro Bit by Bit, the series in which I'm trying to break down modern European history into small bite-sized pieces so that you can better understand it. And we're in AP review mode. This video is going to cover the very last section of the AP Euro exam. And if you haven't watched the other videos that go through the other parts of the exam, you can click the link here and go back to the very beginning of these and work your way through. But if you watched them all, you know that we're on the last part, and that last part is the long essay question. So let's see what it's all about. Okay, so when you get to the long essay question, keep in mind you're going to be a little bit tired. You will have gone through a multiple choice section, you will have done all of the 4 short answer questions, taken a break, and read documents and then written your DBQ, and now you're left with the LEQ, the long essay question. Now on this section you're going to be provided with 2 choices, and of those you get to choose one and write about it. The hard part about this is that you're not going to have a whole lot to work with. This is really going to be a question of what you know and what you're able to do. That, for some people, could be bad news. It really depends on what the prompt is. If it's something that you know well, great. And if it's something you don't know so well, that's going to make things a little bit harder. But what you do have with the 2 choices is it's going to give you 2 different periods of time. So hopefully, of the 2 choices, there's one that you know something about. Now the LEQ will target a specific historical thinking skill, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's graded on a 6-point scale, and much like the DBQ, this is a checklist of things that you have to be able to do in order to get a good score. Now don't worry, you don't have to remember them all. They'll be provided for you in the instructions. You'll see them in there. Now your first point is going to come from your thesis. Your thesis is obviously that sentence or series of sentences that sets up your argument. Here's what it is that I'm going to try and prove. And you'll then go on to back that up in your body paragraphs. The thesis statement must address all parts of the question, but it can't restate the question. So please don't write some thesis statement that's like, there were various things that led to such and such, because that's just not a very good thesis statement. And don't simply turn the prompt into a sentence that you're going to answer or you're going to talk about. Make it a little bit original. The next 2 points test your ability to address the historical thinking skills. The first one is comparison. And in this type of thinking skill, you're going to be asked to compare and also contrast 2 different things. So you're going to show similarities and you're going to show differences. 2 points because one is simply showing and listing things that you know that are different and the same, much like a Venn diagram kind of thing. And the second point is for explaining why those differences and those similarities occurred. So that's really where you're going to get your extra point. You have to come up with the information on your own, but rather than just listing similarities and differences, get the second point by explaining why those things occurred and why they would be different and why they would be similar. The second historical thinking skill is called causation. This is your ability to determine and describe long-term and short-term causes of a particular event. Now, it differentiates between a 1-point and a 2-point response. 1 point describes causes. You talk about them. Here are some causes of this. The second point is for explaining why they caused. Long-term causes, how they set the stage for what might come, and then short-term causes, why they actually caused things to happen. The third thinking skill is change and continuity over time. In other words, there are some things that continue to be the same over time, and there are some things that change over time, much like the others. Describing how it changed or continued over time or continued over time gets you 1 point. Describing why it changed or continued over time gets you the 2nd point. I think you should be getting the idea here. And then the fourth thinking skill is periodization. This is your ability to differentiate between different periods of history. And so you're going to be asked to describe why it is that the thing that's part of the prompt is different from what came before and or what came after. The second, that would be a 1-point response. The second point then comes from describing why it's different from what came before and what came after. And those are your 2 points. So one historical thinking skill will be addressed, and you have to not only describe what happened, but then describe why it happened. So now that you've got your thesis and now that you've got your thinking skills out of the way, that's half of the points already. Now the next 2 points come from your use of evidence. In other words, specific examples, specific events and people and things like that, the real meat of history. If you're able to come up with some pieces of evidence and put them down there, you should be able to get one of the 2 points. The second point comes from being able to really examine and use that evidence to show how your thesis is actually developing. In other words, the evidence that you use to get 2 points is evidence that will support your thesis in a way that it becomes a very persuasive essay. So focus on trying to organize your thoughts so that you can do that. And then finally, the last point comes from our old friend, synthesis. In some way, you have to be able to take this idea and liken it to some other period of time, some other area of the world, some other field of study, or anything really outside of this. This is your conclusion. This is where you kind of like globalize the whole thing. Now, this is only worth 15% of the exam grade. So this should be sort of like the final stretch of the exam. Don't spend too much time stressing over it because it's only 15%. But do spend time writing a good, solid essay. If you can use evidence to back yourself up, then your thesis is probably valid. And it's up to you to persuade the readers that your thesis is valid. So that's a pretty quick overview of the long essay question. Writing a persuasive historical essay with all of the information that you've got right up here. And if you've been working at this all year, then this one should flow fairly nicely. Remember, you have 2 choices and you only have to write about one. So choose the one that you think you know best. Maybe brainstorm for a couple of minutes just to see what you come up with. And then sit down and take time to write. One more piece of advice. Restate your thesis in the final paragraph, because if you don't get it in the first paragraph, you can get credit for having your thesis in your concluding paragraph. So that's about it, and that wraps up the types of questions you'll see on the AP European History exam. So good luck to all of you. Please study hard, get prepared. This thing is going to be great. So until next time, as always, my name's Paul Sargent. This is AP Euro Bit by Bit, and thanks for watching. Have a great day, and have a great AP exam.